Welcome to Nigerian Speaking by the Policy Dialogue Group. Join us in this episode as we dive deep into the world of Almajiri education in Nigeria. Today, we're not just touching on an ordinary topic. We have a very special guest with us, Mohammed Keana. Mohammed is the heart and soul behind the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative, and with his relentless dedication, he advocates for the rights and social inclusion of West Africa's most marginalized children. Just to give you a glimpse of the impact he's making, Mohammed's efforts have touched the lives of over 5,000 children across 15 northern Nigerian states, and his partnerships are expansive, from the Nigerian government to the United Nations. He is a microbiologist by training, but is now a global education advocate. Mohammed's journey is a very interesting one, and today we're going to unpack that journey. We're going to learn how this changemaker has transformed the lives of children. So if you're passionate about education and human rights, or if you're just looking for that spark to make a difference in your own corner of the world, this episode is for you. This conversation with Mohammed promises to be both interesting and insightful. So with that, I would like to start by talking to you, Mohammed, about your background and how you got involved in this work.
Thank you very much for bringing me to your podcast. So just like you introduced me, I'm Mohammed, and I work with the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative. I started the initiative after my undergraduate in 2014. I finished my undergraduate and NYC in 2014, and then thereabout in 2014, I was involved in voluntary and civil society space. And then an unfortunate incident where Boko Haram adopt Chibok girls in Nigeria. Being the civil space, I joined the campaign for the Chibok girls. And it was in that campaign that the consciousness of talking about the Almajiri situation began, understanding the fact that the bunch of young people who were part of the Boko Haram crisis, of course, could be described as those like Almajiri who grew up not being empowered educationally to be able to be productive in the society, and then being used for such being easily recruited into the Boko Haram crisis, So while I'm advocating for the girls, I became more interested in what is the root cause that led to the adoption of the girls, So I then started talking about the Almajiri situation. Why are we having millions of children who are out of school and not having education? These are security challenges that of course, precursor to what we have then as the adoption of the Chibok girls. So this is, in brief, how I started, and of course, continue to speak around the issue of the right to education for the Almajiri children in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Obviously, your work is around Almajiri, but I wanted to take a step back. This word Almajiri has even become controversial. You've seen people use it as a slur. People don't have a basic understanding of what an Almajiri is or an Almajiri system is. So can you start by talking to our audience, explaining to them what exactly this Almajiri system is, how it's been passed down from generations, and what are the benefits or disadvantages of this system of education?
Okay, thank you very much. So the word Almajiri means somebody who moved from one place to another, for the purpose of seeking religious knowledge. In the context of the children I work with Almajiri in Nigeria, it refers to children from the rural community where parents entrust them to a malam or a teacher who is versed in religious education, away from their community, and these children go to receive education knowledge under this malam or teacher, who serve as their guardian, as their teachers in the midst of hundreds of other children who come from different parts of the community and the society. So the structure of the Almajiri system, or the foundation of it, is primarily for people to educate their children on the religious education is to seek for religious education for their children. Just like you move from Nigeria to the US to have better education in the US, it was also the same idea of parents sending their children away to a community far away from where they are for the purpose of getting a religious education from a scholar who operates an informal education system. So this practice was normal practice even before the coming of the colonial masters and the introduction of Western education. And it was something that was going, there were no issues around the practice, before people within the community come together to support children who come for such practice. And there was no any issue of exploitation and all of that. But of course, with the introduction of Western education and then the coming of the colonial masters, where the local authority tax collection system was taken away from them, so they are not able to support these children. And of course, with the increasing of economic hardship within the community and of course, general development within society, the support that these children usually get before to sustain themselves was no longer there. And so gradually they are forced to fend for themselves by either going to people's houses to do menial jobs on farms, and that gradually translates into them begging on the streets every day to sustain themselves. And so all of this then translates to what we see them today being a nuisance on the street. But essentially is the fact that the religious education they get in this school are not enough for them as citizens and as children to prepare them for the future opportunities and life of the present day that we are. And so by their positionality as Almajiri children under such practice, they are precluded from access to formal education. They don't get to have any form of education because they have been sent at younger age, at school going age. So instead of going to formal education or having a multi-education attendance where you have both the formal and the religious one, they just go to the religious education. And the implication of that is that they miss out on the formal education, which is critical for their self-empowerment and, of course, their future aspiration in a way, in code, So this become an issue for the society and for the country. And this also, with many other unintended consequences, it has so many implications, security-wise, economic-wise, development-wise, not just within the region, but the whole country and beyond. And of course, this informed the reason why we started our advocacy and all of that. So the importance of the Almajiri education basically is to teach young children in faith-based education. Like I said, it's something that was noble and novel. It was noble, and of course, as a Muslim, everybody strive to learn the Quran, so it's not something that is bad. Unfortunately, because it's not being supported, it's not being done in a way that prioritize the children's well-being and welfare and even their future aspiration as children, then it's one of the reasons why it then becomes, of course, a problem where it then calls for action, and is exactly what informed our decision to work on this.
This is very interesting because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that we have these different systems across different parts of Nigeria where kids are sent far away from home in search of better education or knowledge or even so. Thank you for explaining that to us. So now I want you to wear your policymaker's hat. You've worked with policymakers here in Nigeria and across the world. And talk to me about, because we hear these statistics, there are 20.2 million out of school children around Nigeria. And then talk to me from your perspective as someone who's working on this, in this system. What are some of the things that Nigerian policymakers can do to alleviate this problem and in turn give development to a greater population?
Reallocation of resources and redirecting of intervention to where it matters most. So I'm sure you're, as a policy student, of course, for any government, for any policymaker whose is desire or desirous to achieve its policy goals, as a government who maybe make a proposal or have drafted a very good and policy initiative to address certain problem, in this case, issue of children who are not going to school. Your major concern is to achieve the goal of taking these children off the street to school. And in Nigeria, we're very good in drafting different policy initiatives. Unfortunately, it's not been accompanied with the right policy tools and incentives to achieve the policy goals. So if over the years, Nigerians have established different policy, we have the most recent one is the UBEC, Universal Basic Education in 2003, which stipulated that every child should be sent to school. And if parents fail to do that, they will be imprisoned. There's some of the provisions on that. So these are all nice policies that have clear issue of punishment. Of course, with there's no reward in it. But for you to achieve this policy goal of ensuring that you have all your children in school, you need to have the right policy tools, the right policy intensive to be able to achieve it, And unfortunately, that has not been the case, especially in the issue of addressing the Almajiri situation. Okay. There have been those policies in most cases with the punishment and provision in it without the reward. But if you are proposing policy to address issues that has to do with socio-cultural norms, there are places for laws. Laws and policies are good, but the implementation is better. You cannot achieve implementation of policy you cannot achieve implementation of policy that has to do with social norms without addressing or without providing an alternative to that social norm. You cannot achieve it. Why? Because the first step in addressing a sociocultural norm is not law. There are places for law in addressing things, but the first thing, you need to provide an alternative to that social norm before you can be able to implement the law. Okay? And so this is what the Nigerian government and people who deal with the issue of Almajiri have not been able to do around this issue. So most times you see them drafting nice policies. These are what you want to spend. This is the punishment, but there's no reward. In public policy, you have to consider both the police and the market, and in all of that, while there's a place for punishment, there's also you need to also apply the carrot and stick approach in a way, right? There is a carrot and then there is the stick, So most of the time they just try to use punishment to say, oh, if you don't do this, you'll do this. But it doesn't work like that in policy. If you want to achieve your policy goals, you must get your policy tools and incentive right. And in most cases, this has not been done in addressing the Almajiri situation. And that is why perhaps there have not been much progress in it in the area. So that's why I mentioned that, so that's one aspect. And the other aspect has to do with also misallocation of resources and also misallocation of resources and of course the interventions, So when you put resources and your intervention approach in where they are not supposed to be, you will just be spending money there and then you're not addressing the problem, So this is currently what is happening.
Can you talk to me? And I know you're not in politics, so I don't want this to be necessarily about individuals, but can you talk to me about how the government is failing, or we even as a people, how we can get it right? So what are some of this misallocation of resources that happens? What do you typically see? Is it that, so for example, if you're taking a holistic approach to this problem, what are the sort of things you focus your funding on? And what has government traditionally focused their funding on? So explain to us what the gap is.
So the gap basically is in, like I said, not really in really deciding or knowing exactly what the appropriate solution should be. Okay, like as it is now, the government just responding to the symptoms of the problem and not addressing the root cause, and that's basically the gap. So the situation of Almajiri children is multifaceted. You have them begging the street, so it's an nutrition challenge. You have them not having health, so it's a health challenge. You have them sleeping in a bad environment. Then you have them not going to school, so it's an educational also problem. And when the government want to address, or what the government have consistently, the trend and the pattern is that they address the symptom. So you see them, like the last time the humanitarian ministry work on them, they provide for them laptop, tablet, and they took a big TV screen to the Almajiri Center. So you can see, if you calculate the amount of money that is being spent in those districts, you will now understand when I say misallocation of resources, right? Then you see also some NGOs, going to do health outreach for them and all of that. One time, and so of course, this is an emergency response to humanitarian issues. But the second aspect of the humanitarian response is the one that has to do with addressing the root cause of the problem, so that this solution that you are providing becomes address the situation. And that is what the government are mostly not interested in doing for political reasons and exigency. So the issue, what has to do addressing the root cause of the problem, takes a long time for it to manifest. But these people have a short 4-year period to demonstrate impact. And so they focus more on addressing the symptoms, which unfortunately backfires. And then the cycle of the problem keep going on and on and on and on. So essentially, the gap is in the failure of the government to address the root cause of the problem, but responding to the symptoms, which usually are not sustainable, they are not long-lasting, and they just window dressing solution to a complex and systemic problem, which it doesn't actually last,
Okay, so now I want to focus a little bit more on your work and your approach, like what you're doing at the Almajiri Child Rights Initiative and ACRI. Given that we now have an understanding of what the system is and what the challenges are, so talk to me about your approach and what you do in this space.
So our approach is a three-pronged approach. Okay, one is advocacy, policy advocacy, and accountability, and the second is a humanitarian humanitarian support and intervention, and then the third is behavioral change campaign to address the social norm associated with the practice. Okay, the first and the third approach are aimed to address the long-term and the systemic issue, what will address the root cause of the problem. Okay, so the policy advocacy and accountability is aimed to inspire policy change at the government level, to initiate and amend policies that could address the situation from the root causes. And then the third approach, which is the behavioral change campaigns at the community level, is aimed at addressing the social social norm associated with the practice, And then the third one, the second one, which is the humanitarian intervention, is meant to address the immediate need of the children, because usually addressing a systemic problem like this take a long time, but it doesn't mean that all the children will have to die or will not go to school before you address it. So you need to be doing that while you are also looking ahead. And our values and approach is that whatever humanitarian effort or intervention we're making must be in line with our long-term goal of achieving the situation. So we don't just do random activities that doesn't really address the situation, or it will not lead to addressing the situation. So these are basically the approach we take. Remember, we're talking about more than 10 million children, and as a principle, we are not really interested, or are not really focused on this, or are not obsessed with this concept of small is beautiful, where we attend to a few hundred children and feel good about the situation. The number is huge, and we cannot hinge the progress and development of our society on the concept of small is beautiful, just so that we feel good and show that we are making impact, So we are ambitious in terms of our approach, and that's why we are very, very focused on the issue of the advocacy and policy, because there are two most effective ways of achieving a large scale impact, and that is politics and advocacy. And if we do the advocacy to the politicians, they can be able to implement policy that can address the issue in millions, compared to us just, affecting a few hundreds. So this has been our approach.
Yeah, as a student of systems thinking myself, obviously when you think about Nigeria and the policies that we need to make, you have to think about how interconnected the issues are, what are the feedback loops, what's the causality. So as you're talking about this, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm also interested to know, because this is something that you can see as an issue in multiple areas of our country or economy, which is the issue of behavioral change. Are there lessons that you've learned about how to create behavioral change within populations or large amounts of people from this work that you do that we can take on and apply to other policy areas?
Absolutely. Even before this work, I was part of a research on maternal and neonatal death in Gombe. And in fact, it's one of the inspiration I got and a conviction to say that if Almajiri practice is a social and cultural thing, with the right information intervention, it can be changed. You can change people's behavior. So I've seen very firsthand women in the rural community accepting the new modern teachings of self-delivery. People in the rural community prefer to give birth at home. Old women prefer their children and their in-laws to give birth to their grandchildren at home and all of those things. They don't practice skin to skin. They don't practice. They make their in-laws to do hot bath and all of those traditional practices that could endanger the mother and the baby. From that research I was involved in 2014, I saw old woman, grandmother, telling me how she encouraged her descendants to go to the hospital, encouraged them to do skin to skin, was really preaching the modern practice that we're talking, So, but this is something that they have been used to it for decades, So it was clear to me that with the proper information intervention and the right framing of awareness tools, you can be able to change behaviors, okay? So that you can be able to achieve your policy goals and all of that. So it is possible to change people's behavior. But one thing with behavior change campaign that perhaps people are getting wrong is that it's not a one-off thing, okay? It is not a one-off thing. It has to be consistent and persistent over quite a long period of time. Remember, we are trying to change whole people belief and perception. A social norm is something that people are already used to it. In fact, for them, it's normal thing. It is you that see it as abnormal. So, a social norm is something that people grow up to see. It's something that the whole community see as normal. So it is their own normative belief. And as people, for you to change it, you need to be able to have a consistent and persistent that behavior change campaign over time. And you will be able to that's how we can be able to get results from issue of addressing social behavioral change. And so I think it's possible to achieve behavior change in some of the issues that affect us in Nigeria.
Okay, so one thing I keep thinking about is this tension between traditional way of doing things and modernity. And, oftentimes something that comes up when you're trying to implement some of these changes in the field is that this is how we've always done things. Some of these Western ideas are not so great. What's the balance you need to have when introducing modern way of doing things and also preserving culture and traditions? And this, you can see this in different aspects of even how we do business in Nigeria.
I think the key thing is that more recent call for respect, collaboration, and involvement of local communities or beneficiaries in whatever you are doing. And so it is not to come with that wide gaze mentality to say that you are bringing some interventions or ideas that is superior to their own cultural beliefs and norms, right? So it's not enough for you to say, oh, the way you're doing this, your traditional stuff is bad. It's not for you to come with that arrogancy to tell people to change the way they do things, So, but it's all about framing, okay? And there are different types of framing. There is the public good framing. There is the human right framing. And it is left for you to be able to couch your messages to reflect this different framing. And you can then be able to come to a compromise with people. So, for instance, if I see you wearing eyeglass the way you are wearing your eyeglass now, I will not come with the arrogance and say, remove this eyeglass because use your natural eyes and all of that, right? Assuming the glass doesn't serve you any purpose. But I can frame my message to say that if you put this glass and it's not serving you any purpose, it can reduce your functionality of your eye, Then you will, through such framing, but respecting your own destiny and not being arrogant of what I have to tell you, you can be able to come to understanding with me, And so I think this is essentially the way to go about introducing modernity in trying to address a traditional issue that people are already used to. It's about respect, it's about collaboration, it's about co-creating and essentially taking the local people or the people you want to do things with along, So I think taking this approach will go a long way in enhancing and achieving this goal of trying to at least change traditional way of doing some things.
So finally, another aspect I wanted to talk to you about in terms of policy that often comes up across different sectors is information and data. And how do you go about collecting the right data that you need for this work you do? Because it's very important for getting the solutions right in the first place. What kind of innovations have you guys made around data collection and getting the data right?
I agree with you that people are so obsessed with the issue of data. And of course, yes, with data, you're able to make proper and informed decisions. And on the issue of the Almajiri, complete indeed, because two things that have also been affecting effective implementation is the issue of data. Without data, there cannot be any accountability, both on the part of government and those who encourage the system. So what we are doing for us is working with one school at a time and trying to ensure that the Malams keep record of all the children they have. We are currently trying to develop a database to ensure that every child within a system of the Almajiri system is documented with information about where he comes from, if possible, their parent contact or their village head contact. We are also hoping to also get them enrolled in the Nigerian National Identity Management System, So we hope to be able to develop this, not just for the purpose of developing sake, but also to inform our health initiative that we want to do for them at Almajiri. We want to be able to initiate a system to provide medical help for these children wherever they are, because one of the things that affect them is that the fact that when they're sick, they're helpless. So we want to be able to develop data that can really guide us in providing this. So yes, data is very essential, and we are taking steps to adopt a framework for that, and hopefully, but it's not yet very clear to us, but we're looking into doing it.
Okay, finally, thank you very much for speaking with us on this issue of education, particularly in northern Nigeria. I would like to end this interview by asking you to make some recommendations for us. So I would like to ask you who your favorite Nigerian author is.
Simon Kolowale. He's the editor of The Cable. I think he has written a book. I've not read the book, but I've read a lot of his articles on the back page of his paper. I believe he's also qualified to be called an author. I'm sure an author is not the only person that writes big books, right?
Okay, yes.
So for me, I love to read his back page. The name of his column is Back Page on This Day, but he's the editor of Cable. I love his analysis of issues and politics, So I'm not a very good reader, so I've not read a lot of books. But my favorite Nigerian author would be, it's not Chimamanda or Chinua Achebe. I'm not sure I've read any of their books, unfortunately.
So you're more of a reader of non-fiction than fiction.
Yeah,
you read essays and current affairs.
Yes, I like something issue of governance and all of that. I mean, one of the book I was reading more recently is Dead Aid. Okay, she's not a Nigerian.
Dembi Samoyo, yes.
Yeah, Dead Aid. I find it very interesting, So those kind of books are the one that I read, and not Achebe or Chimamanda.
Okay, a policy book.
Yeah.
So the recommendation will be Dead Aid and Simon Kolawale's essays on the back page of this.
Yes.
Thank you very much